Hello, hi everyone. My name is Daniel Bronin, student at the University of California, Santa Barbara and retail specialist, and welcome back to yet another retail case study. Today, we're looking at another retail department store which specializes in the East Coast, Midwest, Upper South, and other regions in the United States, except, of course, the West Coast. And since we've done a retail case study, this one is going to be a little over than a month since the last one. We're going to delve into this company's history and what they were. So let's go right ahead. So the table of contents for this video, we have our introduction, what is Ames or what was Ames, beginnings in the 1950s, steady expansion and success in the 1960s and 1970s, major acquisitions and continued vigorous expansion in the 1980s, decline in the late 1980s, their first bankruptcy in 1990, their emergence from the first bankruptcy and restructuring plan in the early 1990s, other major acquisitions and expansions in the mid-1990s, further trouble and store closures in the late 1990s to early 2000s, their attempts at restructuring in their second and last bankruptcy in the early 2000s, and finally, closure of all stores 2002, end of an era for the company. Introduction to the case study. Ames department store, famous for its green and white and sometimes red lettering in their store design, was a popular department store chain in the East Coast of the United States of America. Now their logo, it was first red. After the first bankruptcy, it turned to green and white. So just letting you know for that. Primarily, this is going to be capturing the green and white lettering, but keep in mind, of course, that Ames used to have a red logo. With humble beginnings starting in Stonebridge, Massachusetts in a textile mill, the company soon began to expand as a general store. Providing discount items to smaller towns on the East Coast, the idea proved successful until their first bankruptcy as a result of vigorous expansion through purchasing other companies or acquisitions. However, Ames soon emerged from bankruptcy and continued expanding while fixing their previous issues. After buying out Hill's department stores in 1998, Ames became the fourth largest department store chain in the United States. However, due to the ever-growing retail market, bad leadership strategies, and little to no cash flow as a result, the company resorted in closing all of their stores in 2002. Never heard of Ames? Want to know more about the unique chain? Well, you're in the right video because, of course, we'll be covering it. So what exactly is Ames? Ames Department Stores was an American department store chain which at its peak operated 700 stores across 20 states in the United States. Ames was located in the Northeast, Upper South, Midwest, and DC markets. During its peak, alongside 700 stores, Ames was America's fourth largest discount retailer behind Walmart, Kmart, and Target, those in order. Known for its A-plus value and training videos on YouTube, today we explore the beginnings and operations of Ames department stores. So here we go. After the introduction and what is Ames, now we're going to delve into their beginnings in the 1950s. Ames department stores got its beginnings in 1958 when three brothers, Milton, Irving, and Herbert Gilman, joined with their business partner, Philip Feldman, in opening their first general store in the Ames Worsted Textile Coal Mill in Southbridge, Massachusetts. Known for their rural area that does not have any competition from other big retail companies during the time, the brothers, alongside their business partner, took the opportunity on the general store and made it a discount department store while retaining the name Ames. Ames was known to be smooth sounding from the brothers, so they said, let's keep it. Let's just incorporate it in our business. Following on this discovery and business strategy, Ames decided to expand their business by converting industrial sites to discount stores and other rural sites due to the cheap real estate of the properties. The second store opened the following year in St. Johnsbury, Vermont. After opening their first discount store and solidifying their foundation with a new business strategy, Ames began to expand through acquisitions, which provided success in the coming years. And after opening their first two stores in the 1950s, we now see steady expansion and success in the 60s and 70s. Concentrating their focus on the Northeastern market and having a profitable business strategy, Ames Company was officially incorporated in 1962. During the 1960s, Ames continued to open stores in smaller towns which had no discount department stores and remained profitable by cutting costs when possible while serving local communities. In May 1967, Ames was added on the American Stock Exchange. By 1970, Ames had a total of 23 stores with $50 million in annual sales. In January 1972, Ames began acquiring companies as it made their first acquirement by purchasing the Joseph Levitt Corporation and the K&R Warehouse Corporation. That same year, in November, Ames started trading on the New York Stock Exchange, NYSE. In 1978, Ames acquired Davis Wholesale Company for $1 million, which brought in 13 W.T. Grant stores. Moreover, during the same year in November, Ames purchased Neisner Brothers, Inc. out of Chapter 11 bankruptcy for $38 million, which had a retail footprint of 32 Big N stores in New York and Florida. Following these acquisitions, Ames had a total of 37 stores after closing 10 stores in the New York area after acquiring Neisner Brothers. Overall, Ames was very successful due to these acquisitions and their smart business model. Serving local communities while quality merchandise at low prices proved to be profitable. Alongside their mail campaigns, it helped boost profitability during the decade overall. Now we go into the 1980s, one of the most important decades for Ames as a result, which really not solidified but laid the foundation for the future and how they expand as a company overall and their leadership development as well. So now we look at major acquisitions and continued vigorous expansion in the 1980s. So during these past 2 decades and leading up to 1981, Ames had 115 discount stores along the East Coast from Maine to Maryland. Additionally, Ames had 20 variety stores, most of them in Florida. By the end of 1981, Ames had sales of $400 million and 8 straight years of growing sales and earnings. This is due to the strict management over debt and interest payments and finances overall. 55% of their sales came from hard goods and 45%, or the remaining portion of the sales, came from soft goods. Additionally, Ames continued to remodel their existing stores and continue opening stores in small towns or near highways. Of course, there is a big trend going on where interstate highways by Eisenhower were opening up. Malls took advantage by opening malls right near the highways, and Ames did the same thing to remain profitable and have people just exit the highway, go into your local Ames, and get quality merchandise at a low price. In 1984, alongside this strategy, Ames made another major acquisition as they bought KDT Industries Inc. out of Chapter 11 bankruptcy for $28.5 million. And as mentioned before, just like Neisner Brothers, this was the second one that has fallen in hard times. This added 42 King's department stores into Ames' retail footprint as a result from the sale. And the next year, in 1985, Ames made their largest purchase yet when they purchased the J.C. Murphy Company for $196.5 million in April 1985. With over 350 retail and variety stores across its portfolio in 14 states, Ames doubled in sales to $1.7 billion, but they experienced temporary debt, of course, which amounted to 80% of the company worth. So just going into ahead and reviewing how much they've expanded in those past few years, we've seen in 1981, Ames had sales of $400 million. 1985, they had $1.7 billion. However, we've seen that the debt accumulated was 80% of the company worth. Was it really worth it? No. But you can have your own answers and keep in mind where Ames is heading in this direction. But it was good to double down and expand the retail footprint, but with that much debt accumulated long term, that's pretty bad. By the end of 1987, Ames still brought in $34.2 million in profit. So they said, well, we made a big acquisition. This was huge. And we still have profits in with some long-term debt. Well, why not just buy another company? And that's exactly what they did, because following J.C. Murphy, Ames purchased yet another retail chain in 1988, 3 years after J.C. Murphy was acquired by Ames. This time, it was a major retail chain by the name of Zayre Corporation. And Zayre is actually a big following with the retail community for people specifically in the East Coast and other parts of the United States. And it's still talked about even today. But Ames decided to acquire this major corporation because they're dealing with hard times during this time period as well. Zayre Corporation was based in Framingham, Massachusetts. Ames bought the company for $800 million, and Ames was now the third largest department store chain in the United States, among the greats Sears, Kmart, and other department stores as well. With both companies combined, now they estimated sales of $5.39 billion with 736 retail stores. In the beginning of the decade, Ames only had 115. Now Ames would combine with Zayre Corporation had 736 total stores. That is a lot of stores, but can they handle it? Well, we'll move on with our acquisitions, and then we're going to talk about their decline. Ames purchased 392 total stores in the Northeast, South, and Great Lakes states. This expanded into their existing market of their operating Ames stores, so they coincided with one another. As the Zayre name was so popular during that time period, and really was with the local communities, Ames kept the Zayre name for a certain period until converted into the Ames stores. Although these acquisitions seem to have boosted sales and their footprint across many regions of the United States, Ames suffered major decline throughout the late 1980s into 1990. From store closures to financial losses, they are chronologically discussed in the next slide. So even though all is good and well with their acquisitions and they were growing stores and their sales really increased by a lot, they increased exponentially, we've had a lot of declines to go through to explain why they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1990. Ames during the 1980s seemed to be doing well due to a significant number of acquisitions with other retail companies during the time period. However, factors such as short and long-term debt and rebranding stores comes at a high cost, which effectively took a toll on Ames. The first sign of a decline in Ames was 3 months after he purchased J.C. Murphy Company. After reevaluating the purchase of the company, Ames decided to close or sell 130 of the chain's unprofitable stores to make their purchase of the company profitable. Additionally, Ames had to convert Murphy stores into the Ames model, which of course had additional amounts of money to be reinvested in that as well. This took a significant amount of time and money, which as a result declined sales and profitability during the mid-1980s. Shrinkage was another problem for Ames as they experienced unusually high shrinkage during the time period. With poor inventory control and pricing mix-ups, this declined the profits to $34.2 million in 1987 alongside the continued conversion of Murphy stores. Of course, when you purchase another company and your inventory control system is set to where your stores were at and you had such a high exponentially growth of stores, your inventory control system won't be as sustainable and obviously profits will shrink even though you're still profitable. It's a lot less than you expect, right? So Ames suffered that decline first of all. However, both shrinkage and the conversion of stores was only the start of a steep decline for Ames. After the purchase of Zayre, in the first month of 1989, Ames closed 77 department stores, in which 74 of them were Zayre stores, and the other 3 were Ames, which most likely were in the same market as Zayre. And they said, you know what, let's just close these stores, and we're going to just repopulate them overall. In August 1989, after 4 years with Ames, J.C. Murphy was later sold off for $77.6 million due to a loss in operations and cash flows with the continuous conversion of Zayre stores. So now Ames was focusing their attention on Zayre. Some J.C. Murphy stores weren't fully converted or they were going to be converted. And Ames said, you know what, if we do both at the same time, we're going to run ourselves to the ground, which they did eventually, but they didn't do so as bad. So they just sold off the whole company. Ames doesn't have to deal with J.C. Murphy now. They're going to deal with Zayre. Although the sale of Ames helped bump up their assets overall, Ames still lost $28 million for the year ended 1989, with Zayre losing $7 million from the $28 million. So Ames as a company lost 21, Zayre $7 million, equivalent to 28. This is due to remodeling Zayre stores under the Ames name and struggling with paying off the acquisition of the company overall. Going to 1990, Ames suffered even more. The company ended 1990 with $228 million in losses, which caused them to close most stores overall. Due to bad management and a lack of understanding of the market Zayre was going after, Ames dug a really deep hole for themselves they just can't get out of. With no money to pay suppliers and the retail competition growing immensely around them, this year Kmart became the #1 retailer in the United States, actually. Ames gave in after merchandisers refused to ship items to them. So Without no cash, they can't pay their suppliers. Supplier doesn't ship merchandise, they can't sell items. So now they're looking at a very, very hard problem, which led them to their first bankruptcy in 1990. On April 25, 1990, Ames Department Stores Incorporated has filed under Chapter 11 bankruptcy of the Bankruptcy Code. Their main factors were vendors not shipping merchandise due to no received payment, their lenient credit policy, not understanding Zayre's markets, no financial backing of Zayre purchased, constant unprofitability of the retail market, and tough retail competition. Going back to the lenient credit policy, Zayre had a credit card, of course, and Ames said, no, we're not going to continue with this. So they didn't, and they reinstated their own policy with influence from Zayre. However, they had a really lenient credit policy in giving credit cards to anyone who basically applied. And this is not good because a person with a bad credit score is not reputable and paying back. So they started spending money like $200, $300, for example, on merchandise, but they never paid it back. So Ames had accounts receivable, meaning AR, meaning that they were supposed to receive the money, but they never actually received it for cash or another form of payment. And they said, well, shoot, we're not going to receive these money from customers, but we sold them the merchandise. What are we going to do? Well, that was one of the main factors that led them to Chapter 11 bankruptcy, alongside Zayre purchase and everything else. And to also put into perspective to make matters worse, during the time of the bankruptcy, Ames was at $1.62 a share. To put this into perspective, before Ames purchased of Zayre, Ames traded at almost $30 a share. Yikes. This is almost as bad as Sears Holdings Corporation in the modern retail market, in which their share, back when they Kmart acquired Sears, it became Sears Holdings Corporation, the power of two into one, their share was almost over $100. Now it's at, I don't even know, 2-3 cents a share, because people on Reddit keep on trading. It's like, oh, this is going to be the new next thing. It's like Blockbuster and Radio Shack. You guys should buy the stock and it'll go up. But it never does. Well, it sort of does, but it's not worth that sort of ratio, in my personal opinion. Everyone has their own opinion. But it's almost as bad as a drop as Sears Holdings Corporation in the modern era, or other companies as well. So yeah, that happened, and they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. After Ames' bankruptcy filing, they secured a $250 million loan from Chemical Bank, a bank headquartered in New York City, to finance their merchandise purchases of the fall season. Additionally, Ames chairman Peter B. Hollis resigned and was replaced by Stephen Pissner, a specialist in retail turnarounds, to help dig Ames out of the hole they dug themselves in. This also led to the logo changing from red to green and white, the one that we're familiar with today. During the Ames bankruptcy filing, Ames closed out 221 stores out of more than 600 they had in 20 states, which employed 55,000 people. That is a lot of employees. With 700 stores, 55,000 employees, Ames looked like a strong company, but once they filed for bankruptcy and closed 221 stores, now they're weak and inferior, or just peasants compared to Kmart, Walmart, or any other department store during the time period. After these store closures concluded, Ames closed an additional 77 stores and laid off more than 4,500 employees after the holiday season. In 1992, Ames prepared financially and as a company to emerge from bankruptcy, fingers crossed, to become a reputable brand once again and build themselves up. A main hurdle during the reorganization process was to pay its creditors in order to help raise $325 million in cash. That's a lot of money right there. That's nothing. That's like, well, that's less than half of what Ames purchased for Zayre, so should it be too bad, right? No, it was a lot during the bankruptcy process. Ames closed another 60 stores in 12 states, leaving 3,500 workers out of a job. In total, from the store closures, Ames closed almost 360 stores during a 2-year process, a little over half of what they used to have. Although things seem optimistic for the company to finally reemerge from Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the company still declined, although the store count was cut more than half of what the peak was of 678 stores. After a disappointing third quarter 1992 of $91.4 million in losses due to deeply discounted items that customers took advantage of and a strong retail market, a management shakeup occurred which caused Pissner to leave his position. Peter Dorner, CFO and Executive Vice President of Ames during the time period, took the position. Although not in the best position to reemerge and on the verge of liquidating all their stores by now, Ames stayed strong and vowed to keep customers happy and, in the same market as they were for the long run. As a result, Ames is something that many did not believe in during a time where Kmart and Walmart was superior, which was re-emerging from bankruptcy and restructuring in the early 1990s. On December 20th, 1992, the bankruptcy judge approved Ames' plan to emerge from Chapter 11 bankruptcy. On December 30th, 1992, Ames formally emerged from bankruptcy with a retail portfolio of 309 stores in 14 states and a letter of credit worth $210 million from its bankers to remodel and replenish their stores and models for the customers. And note, this one is a little sidetrack, but it is important to mention here because this is putting more on the Zara acquisition that occurred in 1988. Note, a conflict occurred during the Zara and Ames transaction where the investment banking firm that advised Ames during the sale mentioned that they should buy the company. Obviously, they're like, yeah, go ahead, spend $800 million on it, that'll be great. As a result, Ames in the lawsuit claimed to overpay for the company, which resulted in misleading information based on the advice. In 1994, Ames settled for $19 million from the investment banking firm, as they should, because that was terrible. It almost ruined their company, and the lawsuit was settled, and they got some extra money so that they could put it towards another acquisition, which we'll mention in the next slide. In 1993, Paul Buxbaum was named chairman of Ames. Joseph Attore was named president and CEO in June 1994 after Thorner resigned. During 1994, Ames finally became profitable after almost 4 years since their bankruptcy. They're finally in a good spot. They ended the year with a net income of $10.8 million with a revenue of $2.12 billion. Not as much as it used to or they were used to back in the 80s, but it was still something. Well, compared to like the $200 million loss they suffered before the bankruptcy, right? One of the reasons for a churn of profitability was due to strategies implemented to entice customers, to shop in their stores. One of these programs was called the 55 Gold program, and if you know anything about Ames, this will excite you. It excites me. I don't know why, but it's sort of interesting how they did this program. This program focuses on customers 55 and older as they were a large market for Ames in rural markets. Shoppers over the age of 55 will receive a 10% discount on merchandise every Tuesday, which essentially gains store traffic and sales due to this promotion. Like, hey guys, you guys get 10% off. Come in with your friends, come in with your party, go to Ames, shop at the department store, and then go after eat at a KFC or something, right? Go ahead. Why not? Spend time with your friends at Ames. The 55 Gold program would be beneficial in Ames restructuring all the way until they closed in 2002. Note, this will pave the way for many retailers to start offering discounts for customers over the age of 50. Retailers such as Ross Department Stores offers a discount every Tuesday for customers over the age of 55 and well. So this model essentially brought in other marketing strategies for department stores or just companies overall to offer discounts on major markets, essentially. And this proved to be effective. So that was one of the main programs that Ames implemented that was pretty smart. As mentioned in the first bullet point, Ames vowed to use their letter of credit to remodel and modernize their stores. This happened because in 1994 alone, Ames remodeled 52 stores, which is a lot compared to 300. Well, not as much as 700 as they used to have, but with 300 stores, that was a good start. Emerging out of Chapter 11 bankruptcy and remodeling stores was their first step in success. However, Ames will go back to their old ways and expand even more with acquisitions, as mentioned in the next slide, which is right here. Another major acquisitions and expansions in the mid-1990s. Between the period of 1997 and 1998, Ames remained profitable. The road to full recovery began to become smoother for Ames posted a positive net income of $34.5 million from $2.23 billion in revenue. So everything was at full speed. Things became a lot smoother. The tracks became smoother. The train was great for Ames. They're going right ahead. With this positive news, why not purchase more stores? You're good to go, right? That's exactly what management at Ames said. because in November 1998, Ames Department Stores Incorporated would purchase the struggling Hales Stores Company for $330 million in November 1998, with the sale finalized in March 1999. This added 155 stores in Ames' retail portfolio, almost half of their overall store count before the purchase. As a result, Ames had a larger presence in New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. Ames would now be the fourth largest retailer behind Walmart, Kmart, and Target, in that order. Ames would later convert 150 Hales stores to the Ames format, which costed them $185 million in remodeling and conversion fees. Additionally, in the next month of April 1999, Ames agreed to purchase 7 Caldor stores and a distribution center in Westfield, Massachusetts for $40 million. Caldor, under Chapter 11 bankruptcy, would later fold as a result. Or during the process, they sold 7 Caldor stores to the Ames company. These acquired stores will be later converted into Ames later in 1999. With more than 155 stores in the retail portfolio from 2 struggling retail companies that have gone out of business, Ames have truly beefed up their competition across the Northeast, Upper South, Midwest, and DC markets. With a plan to help target lower middle income and older customers with their low high quality products, things seem to be on the rise. In 1999, Ames had over 600 stores and 22,000 employees. What could go wrong? Things seem to be pretty good, but like their old ways, things got out of hand. For good. When we analyze this information alongside other factors that were not presented in this slide, Ames was setting itself for failure once again going into the 21st century because there were further trouble and store closures in the late 1990s to early 2000s. Before and especially after Ames' Emergence occurred, trouble was brewing for the company, which signaled for the final demise of 2002. In 1996, because this was before the acquisitions, Ames lost $1.6 million due to a weak holiday season. As a result, they closed 17 stores and laid off over 1,000 employees. So this was minimal. They're like, you know what? Maybe we might close unprofitable stores, reevaluate our store campaign. We'll go from there. No biggie, right? But due to the Hales Department Stores acquisition, this cost the company $330 million, excuse me, with an addition to convert 150 Hales stores in 1999 for $185 million and Caldor stores for $40 million. With a total of $555 million in acquisitions within 2 years, this was bad for the company financially in terms of short and long-term debt. In March 1999, Ames closed 8 stores where Hales stores overlap Hales' existing stores. Minor, right? But a year later, in November 2000, Ames closed 32 stores, 31 of them being Hales stores. With deja vu compared to the Zara acquisition, are we looking at another bankruptcy? Well, we might be, because there were attempts at restructuring and early bankruptcy in the early 2000s. In 1999, Joseph Vittori was still at Ames. As president and CEO, he also added himself the chairman position into his responsibilities. With over 600 stores and a plan to help turn around the company fully, there were high expectations for the company. Remodels, conversions, and bringing in customers to existing markets was their focus of restructuring overall. Although these plans were written on paper, the execution was terrible. With $1.55 billion in debt during the time period, which is worth as much as their company alone, due to acquisitions and other costs alongside a tough retail market that took advantage of Ames's loss, they were at a dead end essentially. To restructure the debt model in stores on August 20th, 2001, Ames filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy once again. With a reason of tough competition from retailers and debt as their main reasons, they vowed to come back better than ever. Due to the filing of Chapter 11 bankruptcy, Ames closed 117 stores and a distribution center as a result. This left the chain with 333 stores, a little more than half of their stores compared to 2 years prior. By this time, Ames' situation did not look so good. With no intent to emerge from bankruptcy and little to no development changes in their stores, Ames continued to close stores and focus on what they had left. In June 2002, Ames decided to close an additional 6 stores, which left them with 327 stores, about half of what they had in 3 years prior. Still under Chapter 11 bankruptcy, Ames was critical in a decision. With tougher markets from Walmart and Target in the East Coast alongside the company slowing down, Ames made a final choice of the fate of the company, which was conversion to Chapter 7 bankruptcy and a closure of all their stores. On August 14, 2002, Ames converted from Chapter 11 to Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which ultimately led to close the remaining 327 stores in the United States. And the main reason why they closed their stores is a tight credit market, slowed down economy, tough retail competition, slower shipments from vendors, and large debt due to new acquisitions. Throughout the retail chain, around 22,000 jobs were lost. The stores closed by October or November 2002. With an A+ value that did not help the company turn around, Ames left the market to be swallowed by Target and Walmart, which already had a larger presence in the area. As a result of all these failed mergers, essentially, Walmart, Target, even possibly Kmart took advantage of this competition and decided to expand vigorously into the East Coast and the other affiliated market that Ames was in. And when they gobbled them up, they took their customers. Customers looked at Ames now as unreliable, and they had cheaper merchandise. They weren't paying as much for the merchandisers, and they said, you know what, I'm going to go to Walmart or Target instead, but not Ames. So essentially, with the economy slowing down, with that situation in mind, and Ames not having a lot of things, this ultimately led them to the decision of closing all of their stores in 2002. Which brings us to our conclusion. Ames Department Stores, Inc., once a great retailer that served the local community with a smart business idea, crashed and burned by expanding too quickly through major acquisitions they simply couldn't afford. Although major retailers took Ames customers from its core markets, which ultimately led to their demise among other factors, Ames still has a reputable fan base that continues to mourn the loss of the large retailer. Images, training videos, and more memorabilia can be accessible through the internet of how the company was before and during their demise as well. And basically what to take away from this is to know about vigorous expansion plans in companies, bankruptcies, both Chapter 11 and Chapter 7, diverse markets throughout the United States and maybe even internationally, acquisitions of one another, and restructuring after suffering from debt and other reasons as well. Okay, and that is about it. So thank you very much for watching this video and making your way until the end. This was a very interesting company to focus on because it was one of the first where it suffered so many acquisitions that they had such a large debt. And there's a lot of lessons that you could really take away from it with acquisitions, how to restructure formally, and what not to do overall, right? So hope all of you are safe and well. Comment below if you have any suggestions for another video. But until then, more videos hopefully will come out during the summer session. I'm Daniel Veronin, and thank you for watching this video. Bye-bye.